We're joined now on by phone by Sam Nunberg, a longtime former Trump official in the campaign and working with him for many, many years in the private sector as well, who also was quoted in this book by Michael Wolff, and as I mentioned, was sued at one point by Mr. Trump in the campaign. Sam, welcome to the briefing room.
Thank you. What a nice introduction.
Yeah, only the best. So, Sam, I want to start with what you're quoted as saying in this book, because there's some pretty strong stuff. At one point, you're quoted referring to the president as, quote, "this idiot." You say at another point that you couldn't say whether he's a good person, an intelligent person, or a capable person, but he is a celebrity. And you recount a really interesting story where you were brought in to explain the Constitution to him, and you say, according to Wolff, "I got as far as the Fourth Amendment before his finger is pulling down on his lip and his eyes are rolling back in his head." So for starters, Sam, did Michael Wolff quote you correctly?
Well, I'm not familiar, actually. I didn't see those quotes that you said where I called him an idiot or anything like that. But I could tell you, for instance, one, I did sit with Michael. I'm not out here to criticize Michael, but I think Michael used flourish, I'll put it, on the events I described. For instance, I wasn't there, and I told this to Michael, to teach the president the Constitution. The president had a granular understanding of the Constitution. It was good enough. What I was there for was, it was around 8 days before the first debate, and I didn't want him to have any gotcha questions. You know, there were infamous questions that have been given in the 2008 debates. I remember, you'll recall, where Chris Matthews asked Rudy Giuliani what's the difference between a Sunni and a Shia. So I just wanted him, in case he had a gotcha question on the Constitution or on a justice, I put like a little script sheet, a 1.5-page script sheet, and we tried to go over some issues. And you got to remember, though, too, the president had a lot going on then Mr. Trump. He was running not only a campaign, but he was not only the leading candidate, he was also running his organization at the same time. And we got to it was around 30 minutes or so, and then the briefing stopped. But, you know, it wasn't as if he didn't know the Constitution. And one thing also, Rick, I wanted to say, too, is if you look at it, whether he knows the Constitution or not, I cannot be happier by the judges he's appointed. I cannot be happier, and I think that they're better judges than 9 out of 10 of those people that were sitting on that debate stage with him would have frankly appointed, and he's done it in a very, very quick and expeditious manner. In terms of, for instance, when he quotes me in saying that the president said, "I'll be the most famous person in the world," the instance that I was telling Michael about was in 2014. The president had decided, I think, basically, once Barack Obama on election night in 2012 had won Virginia, was called, or Florida, he had decided he was going to run for president. One thing I had said to him, we were heading down to Louisiana during the Southern Republican Leadership Conference, and I said to the president, "Look, I don't know how you're going to do out of this. I can guarantee you you're going to do well. I can't guarantee you that you're going to win the primary." The president was actually much more confident about it than I was. Right. But what I can tell you, Mr. Trump, is that 100 years from now, if you don't win this primary, if you don't get elected president, nobody's going to remember who won that primary. Frankly, a lot of people won't even remember who won the presidency. But they're going to still be writing about you, and they're never going to be able to write that you were a perennial tease. And he said, that's right. It's my legacy. I'll be famous.
So, Sam, just to be clear, you're not disputing the quotes, but you're disputing some of the characterizations of the quotes?
Right. I'm disputing the circumstances. And you know what? Perhaps I wasn't clear to Michael about it. These were casual. When I sat with Michael, who I liked a lot, these were very casual type conversations and dinners and lunches, you know, and I consider Michael a good friend. So I'm not disputing. I'm not disputing what he writes in the totality. I'm just trying to give it a little more. I would say, color to the circumstances I describe. I haven't seen, by the way, today. Where was it written that I called him an idiot?
That's in the book. The ABC News has obtained a copy, and that was a quote that's actually from the book. One of the quotes is, this is what you're quoted as saying, "Is Trump a good person, an intelligent person, a capable person? I don't even know, but I know he's a star." Another quote was referring to Steve Bannon. I believe it was, if you could get this idiot elected twice, you'd go down in history.
Oh, sure. So I may have said that as a joke. I don't believe the president. Look, I think Karen knows me very well. Rick, I haven't spent that much time with you. But I'm from New York, and I'm very sarcastic. I would tell you he's not. I certainly probably said that, but he's by no means an idiot at all. So, Michael, once again, is accurate. I may have used that word, yes. He's used, by the way, Rick, I'm sure
Yeah.
you've used very colorful words about me in the past as well.
No doubt. No doubt.
And Sam, a person that you are very close with is Steve Bannon, and I wanted to ask you, what do you think Steve was thinking when he said some of these highly unflattering things about the president and his family, specifically the comment about treason?
Well, first of all, I do want to say, I do want to also get something out. I'm not here as a special pleader for Steve on that comment. I fundamentally disagree with him. One, that meeting was treasonous. I would tell you I would have taken that meeting, but let me also be sure that Bob Mueller understands I had nothing to do with the campaign at that point. In fact, I was sued a couple weeks later. I don't want to be called in for a deposition or the grand jury. But I also fundamentally disagree with the way that he talked about the Trump organization. Rick and Tara, I'm not here to defend the business practices of the Kushner companies. In fact, I think that there could be some problems and legal problems with those. What I will tell you is in my limited dealings or what my observations when I was around the president or the people that worked for him at Trump organization, they abided by the top of the law, by the letter of the law. For instance, when they had the issue in Chicago with the sign, where Rahm Emanuel wanted him to remove that big Trump sign that was in the Chicago hotel, he had the proper zoning. And I just think that the way they talked about, the way Steve talked about money laundering and about Don Jr., that was wholly inappropriate. I think that the president would not have commented or done anything about the book except the fact that Steve comes out there attacking Don and attacking who's his son and attacking the organization. Look, you can attack Jared Kushner. Frankly, you could probably even attack Ivanka because they're in the arena. They're in the White House. He didn't ask them. You know, they've asked for this. But to attack his son like that, I think was really, really wrong, personally.
Hey, Sam, it's Ben Siegel. I'm here with Rick and Tara. Would you mind elaborating on what you just said about legal problems with the Kushner companies in terms of what your thoughts are on that?
Well, I mean, look, here's the history of that. One of the reasons Chris Christie sent Jared's father, prosecuted Jared's father, was for a tax issue. And look, I just read the public reports. You have this 666 Fifth Avenue. Jared buys it. It's probably one of the worst real estate deals in the history of real estate for like $1.8 billion. Buys it at the top of the market. We then had the financial crisis. And this has been reported. I only trust what I read in the New York Times. Jared, during the transition, went to the Waldorf Astoria, met with a Chinese businessman, the head of Anbang, who, by the way, has disappeared now in China, so that could show you how smart that meeting was. And he tried to get funding for 666. You also have what the Washington Post reported with Deutsche Bank giving that massive loan to the Kushner company in October. I think that those are issues. Now, on the other hand, here's a separate issue. Is that something that Michael Weissman should be looking at, who's a member of Robert Mueller's team? Does that necessarily involve Russia being involved in the election? I don't know. I don't think so. Perhaps it's out of the mandate. But I mean, that is an issue. And here's the other issue behind that, Ben, is the fact of the matter is, that goes back to the point I said before. Jared, had he not gone into the White House, he could have done whatever he wanted with 666. But the fact of the matter is his conduct during the transition has given a lot of legal exposure to the Trump White House. And that's just a fact. Whether or not the president likes it, whether or not Ivanka likes it, that's a fact. And that's a problem. And Steve's right there.
Sam, one quick thing on Bannon I want to ask about, because you have, as I mentioned, you were sued by the president before you reached an agreement during the campaign before the election, as I recall. But there's a sense that I've always had around Trump world that you can check out anytime you want, but you can't ever leave. Is this the end of Donald Trump and Steve Bannon, or do you think they may end up on the same team again sometime in the future?
You know, that's an interesting question. First of all, is it the end that they're never going to talk again, that they're never going to communicate? I would say absolutely not. I'd be very surprised. Is it the end that Donald Trump is not going to care what's written on Breitbart? Absolutely not. Breitbart is the conscience of conservative nationalism, and that's just a fact. Sorry to Matt Drudge. But will Steve be back in the White House in a formal role? Will Steve be involved in the 2020 reelect for Donald Trump? I would say probably not at this point. But I don't think Steve necessarily cares. Look, I think that the bottom line is whether Steve was fired or Steve left under his own volition, it didn't end well. Steve wasn't happy there, and I don't think the president was happy. And this was something that was just two big, strong personalities. They're very, very similar, by the way, in a lot of ways. They're iconoclastic. if you spend time around both of them, which I know all of you have, they're big personalities, they're funny, they're gregarious, and they don't like to be pushed around. And at the same time, I know that the White House was trying to keep Steve at arm's length, was trying to not only monitor, but try to moderate Steve and his criticism of the Trump administration. But once again, if you attack, look, my position is, I've told this to people, I've always said this to people, is you can even say anything you want about the president. Perhaps you'll have a relationship with him in the future, but attacking his kids or attacking his business, that's a no-no. And I think that those comments that were put in the book, I think, in terms of Don Jr. and the Trump Organization and money laundering, are very problematic for the future of their relationship.
Some people I spoke to who are close to Steve said that he self-imploded, and that now not only is his relationship with the president at risk, but his relationship with Breitbart is at risk because of Rebecca Mercer, the funder of Breitbart, her relationship with the president. Do you think that Steve has anything to be worried about in terms of his political future? Have you spoken to him? Is he concerned?
I have not spoken to Steve. I've not spoken to Steve directly about this. I've spoken to some people at Breitbart, and it would be news to them if Steve was no longer a part of Breitbart. I think that, look, here's the issue: if they're gonna fire Steve or remove Steve from Breitbart as a result of this Michael Wolff book, then how does that go to Breitbart's brand of being independent, of not being a Trump echo? I think it would be a big mistake by them, but we'll find out. I know Matt Drudge would love for Steve to be fired. I think Matt Drudge would love for Steve to be in the gutter. He had some kind of obsession with him, which is fine, but I would doubt that. And the other issue is Steve has a big control over that board. Steve would have to be voted out. It would be very acrimonious. And I also think that a lot of people in the Washington echo chamber make a mistake here. Steve is not wholly dependent on the Mercers for money. He has plenty of other donors, and I think you're going to see that when he rolls out his C4.
Sam Nunberg, former Trump advisor, longtime Trump associate. We appreciate you being with us here in the briefing room. Thanks, Sam.
It's been great and an honor.